Oh, hello there. Yes, well, that was Monday, wasn't it? Yes. And today we must, of course, discuss Joe Biden dropping out, now that that's sort of looking more firm about what might happen. And, well, it's going to present some problems for the average British commentator, because instead of having just a kind of lazy, isn't Joe Biden old viewpoint to have, they're now going to have to actually get to grips with somebody that doesn't fit into what they want to tell you. And obviously they're rattled. You can tell they're rattled because they're very dismissive, in particular of a woman, but you know, that's just what they're like, really, isn't it? So, just want to give you two classic examples from the Daily Telegraph, both by Jewish writers. And the reason I'm highlighting this is not because I'm being particularly anti-Semitic, but it's intriguing as to what they say or don't about Israel, because that's the key issue for them. But they're not actually going to say that because, you know, I'm sure they haven't quite worked out what the attack line is. Anyway, over to the libertarians. The first up, there is the gorgeous and pouting libertarian Zoe Strimple. Yes, her with the English degree, as we established a while ago. Come on to that. So she says this: Kamala Harris, the giggling fool, will doom America. In chasing Joe Biden out, the Democratic Party has foisted an even worse candidate on voters. Yes, indeed, because you can't have somebody in charge of a country who's a woman, and B, giggles in a funny way. I mean, let's not look at Liz Truss. Of course not, Zoe, no. Yeah, pork barrel, etc. Or maybe the robotic nothingness that was Theresa May, or indeed Thatcher for that matter. But if your primary argument is to simply say, oh, she laughs funny, I don't think that should particularly bar you from office, especially not in her case. But she doesn't actually manage to, I'll link down below as ever, but she doesn't actually manage to say anything particularly in this article at all. But this particular paragraph did take my eye, okay? Are you ready for this, okay? Take this monstrosity, this idea that she can't speak properly, okay? Which is what we've basically been saying about Biden, but we can't obviously apply that to a woman who's very successful in her 50s. So we have to basically try and make things up, okay? Take this monstrosity, bad enough for a failing undergraduate zonked out on drugs, yes, but unbelievable for an American VP. Equality suggests that everybody should get the same thing. Well, that often assumes everybody starting out in the same place, as opposed to equity, which is everyone should end up in the same place, she said again in May. Come again? Well, okay then, Zoe. Equality, suggests that everybody should get the same thing. Well, that often assumes everybody started out in the same place, as opposed to equity, which is everyone should end up in the same place, okay? Now, that's quoting speech, but what I've done, you may notice quite naturally, is put in pauses, like adding commas into a sentence, which is exactly what you do. But, of course, Zoe hasn't done that. That sentence does actually, especially as part of written speech, make perfect sense, as she well knows with that very handy English degree that she's got, which isn't useless at all. So yeah, there we go. That's a reasonable spoken view of what the difference between equality and equity is. It's one of the bugbears that they don't like on the right, because they always have this sneaking suspicion that bright working class people might turf them out of a job, and that would never do, would it? Imagine living in a country where, oh no, we don't live there. Best not to, eh? Yeah, a country where people might actually be getting on in their merit. It wouldn't be done, would it? Anyway, that's Zoe, who manages to suggest that the reason why Kamala Harris will be a bad pick is because she giggles funny. I could point to some bits of film I have of Zoe doing pretty much the same thing, but I wouldn't do that because that's just a bit cheap, really, isn't it? Anyway, she manages not to say anything about Israel, which is odd because she has a lot to say about Israel from her glorious vantage point on Hampstead Heath. And we obviously inevitably come to Jake Wallace-Simmons, okay? Trump is now certain to win the presidency. Yes, you see, if in doubt, just dismiss the other person, a bit like Zoe does. Kamala Harris can only offer Americans more of the same old identity politics they tired of in 2016. And again, perhaps the problem with that, Jake, is that the one thing that Donald Trump does give us in spades is identity politics. He serves up a whole huge dollopfuls, ladling on identity politics about being white, doesn't he? Yeah? But of course we can't actually manage to say that because it is against the law to mention that a particular candidate is racist. You have to suggest that in some way that the nefarious Soros-backed Antifa lot are forcing their arm. Anyway, Jake, of course, does actually come on to Israel because he is a paid-up agent of the Israeli state. So let's see what he says. All of this was some time ago, it's true, but when you're running for president as a Democratic candidate, this sort of record will be scrutinised by the Republicans and the press, and subsequently the electorate. They can pick over her attitude towards Israel, which is hostile to say the least, when 80% of American voters support the Jewish state. Yes, 80% of Americans are very picky with that particular statistic there. They do support the Jewish state. The majority of British people would support the existence of a Jewish state. What they don't support, of course, is genocidal policies against the civilian population, which is a completely different thing. And in terms of being picky and scrutinising things, we will now move instantaneously from the idea of one of the candidates being too old to one of the candidates being absolutely fine, and we mustn't mention age because that's discriminatory. Exactly at the point when Biden resigned that happened. Okay, we won't mention anything that Donald Trump says. It's just one of those things when he loses his way. Okay, it's not that he's old. There we are. Simple. We don't talk about such things. Be rude. Okay, moving on. How will she explain the fact that she insisted the Rafah operation was impossible just weeks before it was successfully carried out by the IDF? Successful. Okay. How will she explain her blatant Jew baiting when she demanded an immediate ceasefire, then allowed the longest pause, oh my God, to extend before adding caveats about Israel's security? To put it another way, Trump will eat her for breakfast. Yes. Imagine insisting on a ceasefire in another state's genocidal actions against a civilian community, and then not instantaneously saying that it'll be okay because I'm sure they were allowed to do it, at least to Jake's satisfaction anyway. Now, Jake, of course, is very much wanting, because of his Zionist sympathies, for there to be a very, very sympathetic American president. Of course he does, because that will keep the bombs supplied. But he might not get it. However, on the evidence of what he's writing here, he definitely is rattled. And as far as I can see, I think that's quite a good thing, right? It would be nice if these people just could manage to give us something reasonably comprehensive about why, for example, it is that Donald Trump might not be an absolute blessing to the world. But if the only reason you are where you are is because you are a libertarian who basically doesn't care about democracy but does care enormously about tax cuts for the uber wealthy, then that's where we end up. It's a bit of a dead giveaway, really, isn't it? Yes. Anyway, do have a lovely Tuesday if you can. Yeah, I'm going to enjoy a bit of downtime, which would be cool. It's got a lot of reading to do. Oh yeah, enjoy.